The afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the small town. Dana Mitchell walked down Main Street, trying to blend in. She wasn't in her usual FBI attire. Today, she wore a simple pair of jeans, a loose shirt, and sneakers, an attempt to enjoy her rare day off. It wasn't often that she got a break, and the chance to visit her old college friend in this sleepy little town seemed like the perfect escape from the chaos of her job. As she passed a local diner, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Leah, her friend, asking if she could pick up something from the general store before meeting her. With a nod to herself, Dana redirected her path toward the store at the end of the street, the wooden sign above its entrance creaking in the gentle breeze. She felt it before she saw it, a lingering gaze. The sensation of being watched, of being judged. It wasn't unfamiliar, but here, in this peaceful town, it was unsettling. Her fingers instinctively moved to check her pocket where her FBI badge was hidden, but she forced herself to stop. "You're not on duty, Dana. Relax." The source of the gaze became clear when she saw the local police cruiser parked at the curb. A tall, broad-shouldered officer leaned against it, arms crossed, watching her with narrowed eyes. His badge gleamed under the sunlight. Officer Mark Reynolds. "Excuse me, ma'am." His voice was deep, carrying a tone of authority that demanded attention. Dana kept walking, ignoring the slight pit forming in her stomach. But his next words stopped her in her tracks. "I'm talking to you, miss. You got a minute?" She turned slowly, her expression neutral, but she felt the heat of frustration rising in her chest. She knew this game all too well. "Is there a problem, officer?" Mark Reynolds took a step forward, closing the distance between them. He was tall, with a thick neck and an air of arrogance that almost suffocated the space around him. His eyes scanned her up and down, as though assessing whether she belonged. "I don't recognize you. What are you doing around here?" Dana took a slow breath, her posture calm, though her mind was racing. She'd been in this situation more times than she could count, being questioned, not because of anything she had done, but because of what she looked like. "Just visiting," she replied simply, keeping her tone measured. "I'm here to see a friend." Reynolds let out a humorless chuckle, crossing his arms tighter over his chest. "Funny, you don't look like you're from around here. Got any ID?" Her patience was wearing thin. "Do I look like someone who's committed a crime?" His smirk disappeared, replaced by a hardened stare. "Ma'am, I asked you for ID. Don't make this difficult." Dana's mind raced. She could pull out her FBI badge right then and there, end this entire situation with one flash of her credentials. But something stopped her. She knew men like Reynolds. She'd dealt with them throughout her entire career. Men who hid behind the badge, who abused their power under the guise of law and order. She wasn't about to let him think he could push her around. Not like this. "Officer," she said slowly, holding his gaze, "I haven't broken any laws. There's no reason for you to ask for my ID." Reynolds stepped closer, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. His voice lowered, dripping with menace. "I'm giving you one last chance before this gets ugly." The tension in the air was thick. Dana could feel the stares from the few bystanders across the street, their hushed whispers barely audible over the pounding in her ears. She held her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I think we're done here," she said firmly, turning to walk away. But before she could take another step, she felt his hand clamp down on her arm. "Don't walk away from me," Reynolds growled, his fingers digging into her skin. Dana froze. Her entire body went rigid, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes locking onto his. The calm, collected demeanor she'd maintained began to crack, but not in the way Reynolds might have expected. There was no fear in her eyes, only a cold, controlled fury. "Let go," she said through gritted teeth. Reynolds hesitated for a moment, clearly not expecting the strength in her voice. But instead of backing down, his grip tightened. "I don't think you understand the situation here." Dana exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Her instincts kicked in. She could take him down in seconds, disarm him, flip him to the ground, and have him begging for mercy. But she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. She wasn't going to let him turn her into the aggressor. I understand perfectly, she replied, her voice steady. I understand that you're abusing your authority. The words hit like a slap. Reynolds' face twisted in anger, and before either of them could process what was happening, he shoved her back, sending her stumbling into the side of the cruiser. The few onlookers gasped, but no one moved to intervene. Dana caught herself against the car, her hands instinctively reaching out to steady her. For a brief second, the world seemed to blur around her, the adrenaline pumping through her veins. But as she straightened up, she felt a dangerous calm settle over her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge. The glint of gold caught the fading sunlight as she held it up for Reynolds to see. His smug expression faltered. Agent Dana Mitchell, FBI. The words were a bullet to his ego. His eyes flicked to the badge, then back to her face, the realization slowly dawning on him. He blinked, stepping back as if physically recoiling from the truth. What? He stammered, his bravado evaporating in an instant. Dana didn't let him off the hook. She stepped forward, closing the gap between them once more, her voice low but deadly serious. You want to know why I'm here, Officer Reynolds? I'm investigating a corrupt police department. And guess what? You just made yourself the prime suspect. The color drained from his face, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He took another step back, but this time it wasn't out of intimidation. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. You can't do this, he whispered, his voice cracking. Dana's lips curled into a small, cold smile. Watch me. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing frozen by his cruiser, the weight of his actions crashing down on him like a tidal wave. As Dana walked toward the general store, she could still feel the burning stares from the bystanders, but she ignored them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Leah. It was a message from her superior. New lead on the investigation. Looks like the small town you're in might be more involved than we thought. Dana stopped in her tracks, her mind racing. Reynolds was just the beginning. Dana's pulse thudded in her ears as she made her way out of the general store, the weight of her badge still heavy in her pocket. The confrontation with Officer Reynolds had left her on edge, her instincts sharp and alert. She tried to shake it off, to let it go, but something about the way he had looked at her, like she didn't belong, clung to her skin like a cold sweat. As she reached for her phone to text Leah that she was on her way, it buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. Dana's brow furrowed as she swiped the screen to read the message. Be careful. The department here knows who you are. They're watching. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let her face show it. Quickly, she scanned her surroundings. Nothing seemed out of place, just the usual calm of a small town. A couple of people sat outside the diner chatting, while others went about their business. But now, every glance felt like it could be hiding something more, a shadow lurking behind a friendly smile. Dana slipped her phone back into her pocket, the message echoing in her mind. The department knows. It explained Reynolds' aggressive behavior. He wasn't just a random cop drunk on his own power. He'd known exactly who she was. She walked faster now, her steps brisk but not hurried, keeping her cool. Leah's house wasn't far, just another 5 minutes away. As Dana turned the corner, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, and the engine was still running. Her instincts flared again. Something wasn't right. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket once more. Another text. Get inside. Don't trust anyone. Dana looked at the sedan, and for a moment, she considered walking the other way. But no, she wasn't the type to run. Not now, not ever. With a deep breath, she walked up the steps to Leah's front door and knocked twice, her gaze shifting back to the sedan. The car remained still, but the engine idled, a low hum that added to the tension in the air. The door opened swiftly, and Leah's familiar face appeared, her bright smile momentarily lifting the weight off Dana's shoulders. Dana, you made it. Leah stepped aside to let her in, but her smile faded as soon as she saw the look in Dana's eyes. What's going on? Dana walked in, quickly closing the door behind her. We need to talk. In the kitchen, the two women sat across from each other, the atmosphere heavy. Leah, sensing the gravity of the situation, leaned forward. What's going on? I haven't seen you look this tense since, well, since forever. Dana rubbed her temples. The local police here, they know I'm FBI. I was stopped by an officer on the way here. Mark Reynolds. He got aggressive. Leah's eyes widened. Reynolds? That guy's bad news, Dana. Everyone in this town knows he's corrupt, but nobody's ever done anything about it. His family's been in law enforcement here for decades. He thinks he's untouchable. Dana nodded, leaning back in her chair, her fingers drumming on the table. It's more than just Reynolds. Someone sent me a text. They said the department knows who I am, and they're watching me. And I saw a car parked outside. It's all too convenient. Leah glanced toward the window, her brows furrowing in concern. Do you think they're trying to intimidate you? I don't think, Leah. I know. Dana's voice was firm. But the thing is, they've already made their first mistake. They underestimated me. Leah sighed, standing up to grab a kettle. You want some tea? I feel like we're going to need something to calm our nerves. Dana allowed herself a small smile. Yeah, sure. Tea sounds good. As Leah busied herself in the kitchen, Dana's mind raced. This investigation had just gotten a lot more complicated. What had started as a quiet day off had quickly turned into something much bigger. The corruption in this town ran deep, and now it was personal. She needed to get ahead of this fast. The whistle of the kettle brought her back to the present. Leah poured the tea, her hands shaking slightly as she set the cup in front of Dana. Do you think it's safe for you to be here? Leah asked, her voice soft but edged with worry. I mean, if they're really watching you. Dana took a sip of the tea, letting the warmth settle her nerves. I don't know yet, but I'm not leaving until I figure out what's going on here. Someone wants to scare me off, and that means I'm onto something. Leah sat back down, her eyes scanning Dana's face. You're not going to let this go, are you? Dana shook her head. Not a chance. Just then, the sound of tires screeching outside the house interrupted their conversation. Leah stood, moving toward the window to peek through the blinds. Her face paled. Dana, it's Reynolds. Dana was up in an instant, moving to join Leah at the window. Sure enough, the police cruiser was parked just outside, and Mark Reynolds was getting out, his face a mask of fury. Stay inside, Dana ordered, her voice cold and steady. She was done playing nice. Leah's hand gripped Dana's arm. Wait, what are you going to do? Dana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the door, her hand hovering over her pocket where her badge was hidden. This time, she wouldn't be keeping it there. I'm going to remind him who he's dealing with. The door swung open just as Reynolds reached the porch, his hand already on the handle of his holstered gun. But Dana was faster, stepping out and closing the door firmly behind her, blocking any view of Leah inside. Officer Reynolds, she said coolly, arms crossed. Can I help you? Reynolds sneered, his eyes burning with a mix of rage and embarrassment from their earlier encounter. You've got some nerve, showing your face here. Dana raised an eyebrow. Funny, I was thinking the same about you. Reynolds took a step closer, his large frame looming over her. You think you're some big shot, huh? Flashing your FBI badge around like it means something. This is my town. You don't belong here. Dana's expression didn't waver. Your town, huh? That's interesting. Because last I checked, the law applies to everyone, officer. Including you. He smirked, his fingers twitching near his gun. You think you're untouchable, don't you? She held his gaze, unflinching. No, but I think you're about to find out you're not either. The silence between them was thick, electric, as the tension built. Behind them, the faint sound of Leah's phone ringing from inside the house was barely audible. But Dana's focus remained locked on Reynolds, every fiber of her being ready for whatever came next. Reynolds let out a harsh laugh. You're digging your own grave, Agent. I'll make sure of it. Dana's jaw clenched, but before she could respond, the front door creaked open slightly, and Leah stepped out, her face pale, holding her phone. Dana, it's your boss. Dana frowned, but Leah handed the phone over quickly. The moment Dana pressed it to her ear, her superior's voice crackled through the line. Mitchell, we've got a problem. Dana's grip on the phone tightened. What kind of problem? The kind that just escalated. We intercepted a communication from the local police. Reynolds isn't acting alone. There's a whole network in that department, and they're connected to something bigger. I need you to back off for now." Dana's eyes flicked to Reynolds, who was watching her with a smug look. "Back off." Her boss's voice was firm. "I mean it, Mitchell. We'll handle it from here. You're too exposed." Dana's blood ran cold. She was being pulled out. This wasn't just a case of a corrupt cop. This was a full-blown conspiracy, and they didn't want her in the middle of it anymore. But walking away wasn't in her nature. "I understand," she said calmly, though her mind was already working on how she could stay one step ahead of whatever was coming next. Reynolds must have sensed the shift in her demeanor because he smirked again, as if he knew exactly what her boss had told her. "Looks like you're out of your league, agent." Dana didn't respond, instead handing the phone back to Leah. Without breaking eye contact with Reynolds, she took a slow breath. "I'll be seeing you, officer," she said, her voice low, dangerous. Reynolds grinned. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Dana watched as he turned and sauntered back to his cruiser, the arrogance dripping off him like oil. As the engine roared to life, he drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Leah stood next to Dana, her face a mixture of fear and confusion. "What now?" Dana's eyes narrowed, watching the cruiser disappear around the corner. "Now? Now we fight back." The air was thick with tension as Dana stood in Leah's living room, replaying the conversation she'd just had with her superior. Her pulse quickened, but her face remained unreadable, cold even. Leah paced nervously in front of her, the anxiety palpable. "What did they say, Dana? Are you pulling out?" Leah's voice trembled, her fingers nervously wringing a dish towel she'd grabbed unconsciously. Dana's eyes didn't waver from the front window where she had watched Reynolds drive off just minutes earlier. "They want me to back off. But I'm not done here." Leah's eyes widened. "Not done? What do you mean? They told you to leave. You can't stay. He'll come after you. They all will." Dana turned slowly, her expression hard. "Exactly. And that's what I want." Leah shook her head, taking a step back. "Dana, this is reckless. You don't know what these people are capable of. Mark Reynolds is connected to some powerful folks in this town, people who have the money and influence to bury you. I've seen it happen." Dana crossed her arms, her mind calculating her next move. "I know the risks. But this investigation runs deeper than just a dirty cop with a superiority complex. Reynolds isn't acting alone. If I back off now, they'll sweep it under the rug." Leah hesitated, biting her lip. "And if you don't? What if they do more than just intimidate you?" Dana's lips pressed into a thin line, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then I'll be ready." Leah stood frozen, unsure whether to scream or beg Dana to leave. "You're too stubborn for your own good," she muttered under her breath, before tossing the towel onto the counter. "Fine, I'll help, but only because I don't want to find out what happens if you go at this alone." Dana allowed herself a brief smile. "Thanks, Leah. I'll need you to keep an eye on things while I confront Reynolds. I'm sure he'll make a mistake. It's just a matter of time." Leah's face paled. "You're going after him? Today?" Dana grabbed her jacket, nodding firmly. "If I wait, he'll have time to regroup. I need to strike while he's still off balance." The sun was setting by the time Dana drove toward the station where Reynolds was known to hang out after his shift. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind calculating every possible scenario. She wasn't walking into this blind, but she knew it was going to be a volatile confrontation. As she parked the car outside the dimly lit station, her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Be careful. They're closing in." Dana stared at the message, her lips tightening. Whoever this informant was, they were clearly trying to help, but how much they knew remained a mystery. She needed to focus on the present threat, Reynolds. Taking a deep breath, Dana exited the car, her badge and gun concealed under her jacket, though ready if needed. She strode toward the station entrance, every step calculated, her senses heightened. Inside, the station had the stale scent of old coffee and cigarette smoke. A couple of officers sat lazily at their desks, their conversations halting the moment Dana stepped in. They exchanged wary glances, no doubt having heard of the earlier altercation with Reynolds. Dana scanned the room, her eyes landing on Reynolds seated at the back, feet up on his desk, a smug grin plastered across his face as he saw her approach. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. His body language screamed control, dominance. At least, that's what he thought. Well, 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 Reynolds drawled, leaning back in his chair. Look who came crawling back. Thought you'd be halfway out of town by now, Agent. Dana didn't flinch. She stepped forward until she was standing directly in front of his desk, her gaze unwavering. We need to talk. Reynolds' grin widened. Talk? About what? That little scuffle we had earlier? Or maybe you want to apologize for disrespecting the law in my town. Dana's jaw clenched, but her voice remained calm, even. I'm not here to play games, Reynolds. You know who I am, and I know exactly what you've been up to. The officers nearby shifted uncomfortably, clearly listening in but trying to appear as though they weren't. The tension in the room grew thick as Reynolds stood, towering over Dana by several inches. And what exactly do you think you know, sweetheart? His voice was mocking, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Dana's gaze didn't waver. I know that you're connected to more than just petty corruption. I know about the payoffs, the intimidation, and the strings you've been pulling with certain higher-ups in this town. Reynolds' eyes darkened, his smile fading. You're treading on dangerous ground, Mitchell. And so are you, Dana shot back. I've got eyes on everything now. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. All it takes is one mistake, and I'll be there. Reynolds leaned in closer, his voice a low growl. You think you scare me? I've dealt with plenty of tough-talking women like you. At the end of the day, you're all the same, just looking for an excuse to cry foul when things don't go your way. Dana's calm demeanor cracked, just for a second, as her eyes flashed with anger. And you're just another coward who hides behind a badge to cover up his own insecurities. Reynolds' hand twitched near his belt, but Dana saw it coming. Her hand moved faster, grabbing her badge from inside her jacket and holding it up to his face, close enough that he could see the FBI emblem in vivid detail. This is the only badge that matters now, she said, her voice hard as steel. And if you don't back off, I'll bring the full force of the Bureau down on your head. For a moment, Reynolds said nothing. His jaw tightened, his face flushing with barely contained rage. Then, with a sudden movement, he swatted her hand away, sending the badge flying to the floor. You think you can threaten me? He snarled. This town belongs to me. Dana didn't blink. She bent down slowly, picking up her badge, her every movement deliberate, measured. When she straightened, her voice was ice cold. Not anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Reynolds' face was a storm of fury, but he didn't make another move. The other officers, who had been watching the exchange in stunned silence, shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. Dana took a step back, her eyes never leaving Reynolds. I'll be seeing you again, officer. And next time, it won't just be me. Without waiting for a response, Dana turned on her heel and walked out of the station, her heart pounding, but her steps steady. She didn't need to look back to know that Reynolds was watching her, his mind racing with the implications of their confrontation. Leah was waiting anxiously when Dana returned to her house, her eyes wide with concern. What happened? Did you find him? Dana nodded, setting her bag down on the table. I found him, all right. He knows I'm not going anywhere. Leah exhaled, running a hand through her hair. And? How did he take it? Dana's eyes flicked to the window, her mind replaying every second of the encounter. He's rattled, but he's not going to back down. Not yet. Leah swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. What if he comes after you? Dana's gaze was steady as she met Leah's eyes. Then I'll be ready. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The gravity of the situation hung in the air like a dark cloud, the weight of what was to come pressing down on them both. Leah finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with fear and determination. We need to go to the feds, get more people involved. You can't do this alone, Dana. Dana shook her head. It's too risky right now. The more people I bring in, the more chances there are for leaks. Whoever sent me those messages, they're on the inside. And they know everything. Leah frowned. But what about your boss? He told you to back off. Dana's expression hardened. He doesn't know what's really going on. This is bigger than even he realizes. And until I can prove it, I'm staying right here. Leah's eyes filled with concern, but she nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. Dana was in this now, and there was no turning back. As the night deepened outside, Dana's phone buzzed once again. Another message. They're planning something. Stay alert. Dana's heart raced as she read the words, her mind piecing together the puzzle that was rapidly forming around her. She had to be ready, because whatever was coming next, it was going to be a fight for survival. The evening air was colder than usual, or maybe it was just the weight of everything that was about to unfold pressing down on Dana. She stood at the edge of Leah's front porch, phone in hand, eyes scanning the street. Reynolds hadn't made his next move yet, but she knew it was coming. The cryptic messages from the unknown informant still played in her head. They're planning something. Stay alert. Leah, her face pale with worry, appeared behind Dana, clutching her cardigan tightly around her shoulders. Dana, you need to call for backup. If they come after you. Dana's expression was unreadable, her calm exterior betraying the storm that brewed inside her. I can't bring anyone else into this yet. Not until I have solid proof. Leah stepped closer, her voice trembling. But what if it's a setup? What if they're trying to lure you into something? You don't know who's behind those texts. I know, Dana replied, her tone measured but firm. But that's exactly why I need to keep pushing. If I back down now, I lose the upper hand. Leah's breath hitched, her eyes darting nervously to the street. I can't lose you, Dana. Not like this. Dana's hardened expression softened for a brief moment as she turned to face Leah. You won't lose me. I promise. The sound of tires screeching broke the silence, yanking them both back to the present danger. A police cruiser rolled into view, the headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Dana's pulse quickened, though she maintained her composure. Leah's grip on her arm tightened. Is that? It's him, Dana confirmed, her voice low, watching as the cruiser came to a stop across the street. Mark Reynolds stepped out, his posture as rigid as ever, though there was something different in the way he moved. More deliberate, calculated. He was flanked by two other officers, their faces partially hidden by the shadows. He brought backup, Leah whispered, fear evident in her voice. Dana's jaw tightened. Good. So did I. Before Leah could respond, Dana pulled out her phone and quickly dialed a number. As the phone rang, Reynolds and his men began crossing the street, their heavy footsteps echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Mitchell, came a voice on the other end of the line, her superior, sharp and direct. Sir, I need immediate assistance. I'm about to make an arrest, but the situation's about to escalate. Dana's voice remained steady, but there was no mistaking the urgency in her words. Dana didn't flinch. She held his gaze, her voice calm and unshakable. You're right. I don't know what's coming, but I'll be ready. The door to the FBI van slammed shut, silencing Reynolds' threats. Dana watched as the convoy of vehicles pulled away, disappearing into the night. For a moment, the street was quiet again, the tension slowly fading into the background. But Dana knew that this was just a temporary calm before the next storm. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends. Leah stepped up beside her, her voice soft. Are you okay? Dana let out a long breath, her body finally relaxing after the adrenaline-filled confrontation. I will be. They stood in silence for a moment longer before Leah spoke again, her voice tentative. So, what now? Dana's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, her mind already turning over the next steps. Now, I dig deeper. Find out who else is involved. And whoever's been sending me those messages, I'm going to find them. Leah nodded slowly, though the fear in her eyes hadn't fully faded. Just promise me one thing. Dana turned to her, waiting. Leah's voice trembled as she spoke. Promise me you'll be careful. Dana's expression softened, and she placed a reassuring hand on Leah's shoulder. I promise. But as she said the words, Dana knew that the path ahead would only grow more dangerous. Dana sat in the sterile conference room, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound as she flipped through the thick case file in front of her. She had spent the last few weeks buried in paperwork, piecing together every detail of the corruption ring that she had uncovered. Mark Reynolds had been the first domino to fall, but it was clear now that the rot ran deeper than she had initially thought. The door creaked open, and her superior, Agent Dawson, walked in, carrying another stack of files under his arm. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression softened when he saw Dana. "You've been busy," he said, setting the new stack of papers down beside her. Dana leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms. "Just doing my job." Dawson sat across from her, folding his hands together. "You did more than your job, Mitchell. You took down one of the biggest corruption rings in the state. The Bureau owes you a lot for this." Dana didn't respond immediately. She stared at the files, her mind replaying every detail of the last few weeks. It had been exhausting, draining even, and yet, the sense of satisfaction wasn't as fulfilling as she had hoped. Something still gnawed at her, like a wound that refused to heal. Dawson leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "You okay?" Dana blinked, forcing herself back into the present. "Yeah, just processing." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight she carried. "The press is all over this. Reynolds is looking at a life sentence, and with the names we've uncovered, this case is going to shake up the entire department." Dana sighed, closing the file in front of her. "It's not just the department, Dawson. It's everywhere. Every small town, every city. People like Reynolds think they're untouchable because they've been allowed to be. This isn't over just because we got him." Dawson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. This is just the start." There was a pause, the silence heavy between them. Dana shifted in her seat, then looked up at him. "Do you think it'll ever change?" Dawson's eyes softened, but his expression remained serious. "I don't know. But people like you, Dana, you make the difference. Maybe not in one big sweep, but bit by bit. You chip away at it." She gave a small, tired smile. "Bit by bit." The door opened again, and Leah stepped in, her face lighting up when she saw Dana. "I hope I'm not interrupting?" Dawson smiled warmly. "Not at all. I was just leaving." He stood, giving Dana a reassuring nod. "Good work, Mitchell. You've made us proud." As Dawson left the room, Leah moved to sit next to Dana, her hands clasping nervously in her lap. "I just heard the news. Reynolds is being transferred to a maximum security facility." Dana nodded, though there was little satisfaction in her voice. "Yeah, he won't be a problem anymore." Leah hesitated, her eyes searching Dana's face. "But," Dana sighed, running a hand through her hair, "but there are still so many more like him. People who haven't been caught. People who think they're invincible." Leah reached out, placing a hand on Dana's arm. "You took a big step, Dana. What you did here, it matters." Dana looked at her, the exhaustion visible in her eyes. "Does it? I mean, really? I put away one man. But what about the others? The system that protects them? What happens when the spotlight fades, and they go back to business as usual?" Leah's grip on her arm tightened slightly. "Then you keep fighting. You don't stop. You've come this far, Dana. You can't turn back now." For a moment, Dana didn't respond. She just stared at the table, the weight of her words sinking in. Leah was right, of course, but that didn't make it any easier. The battle against corruption, against systemic racism, it was a marathon, not a sprint, and Dana had only just begun to run. After a long pause, Dana finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. "I won't stop. Not until it's over." 2 days later, Dana found herself standing outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters and onlookers buzzing around as Mark Reynolds was led inside for his final sentencing. The media circus had only grown since the arrest, and now every major network wanted a piece of the story. Dana watched from the sidelines, her arms crossed over her chest. She hadn't wanted to be there, but part of her needed to see it through, needed to see justice being done. Reynolds, in his orange jumpsuit, looked smaller than she remembered, the arrogance and swagger gone from his face. He didn't make eye contact with anyone as he was led into the building. Leah appeared at Dana's side, slipping through the crowd to stand next to her. "It's surreal, isn't it?" Dana nodded slightly, her eyes still on Reynolds. "Yeah." Leah glanced at her, concern flickering across her face. "You don't seem happy." Or relieved? Dana let out a breath, her shoulders slumping slightly. I thought I'd feel something more. Satisfaction, maybe. But all I feel is tired. Leah didn't say anything for a moment. Then, she placed a hand on Dana's arm, her voice soft. You've been carrying this for a long time. It's okay to be tired. Dana smiled faintly, but the heaviness didn't leave her. I just thought putting him away would feel more final. But it doesn't. There's still so much left to do. Leah squeezed her arm gently. And you'll do it. Bit by bit, like you said. Dana nodded slowly, her eyes still on the courthouse steps as the doors closed behind Reynolds. Bit by bit. Later that evening, Dana sat alone in her apartment, the silence of the night settling around her. The case files that had consumed her life for the past few weeks were packed away, but the weight of the fight ahead still lingered. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking the quiet. She picked it up, expecting another work call, but her breath caught when she saw the message. This is bigger than you know. Be careful. They're still watching. Dana's heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening. She had thought the mysterious messages would stop after Reynolds' arrest, but this was something new, something darker. Quickly, she typed back a response. Who are you? What do you want? She stared at the screen, waiting, her mind racing. But there was no reply. Just the lingering silence, the unsettling knowledge that there were still shadows she couldn't see, enemies she couldn't identify. As she set the phone back down, Dana leaned back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling. She had won this battle, yes, but the war was far from over. A knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. Frowning, she stood and walked over, her hand hovering over the handle. Who is it? It's Leah, came the familiar voice from the other side. Can I come in? Dana unlocked the door, pulling it open to see her friend standing there, a concerned look on her face. Hey, everything okay? Leah stepped inside, glancing around nervously. I just wanted to check on you. I know today was the lot. Dana closed the door behind her, offering a small smile. I'm fine. Really? Leah looked at her for a long moment, then shook her head. No, you're not. Dana raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. Oh, you've been running on adrenaline for weeks. You just took down a major corruption ring, and now you're acting like it's just another Tuesday. You're allowed to feel something, Dana. You're allowed to rest. Dana's smile faltered, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to acknowledge the exhaustion. I don't know how to rest. There's always more to do. Leah stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then let me help. You don't have to carry this alone. Dana looked at her friend, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. But as Leah's steady gaze met hers, she felt a small spark of relief, a glimmer of hope. Maybe she didn't have to do it all alone. Maybe, just maybe, there was strength in letting someone else help carry the burden. After a long pause, Dana finally nodded, her voice quiet. Okay. Leah smiled, pulling her into a gentle hug. You've done enough, Dana. Let's take it one step at a time. As they stood there, the noise of the city fading into the background, Dana allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that maybe the fight didn't have to consume her completely. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't always involve running headfirst into battle. And for the first time in a long while, she felt just a little bit lighter.